Hello, hello, hello.
Feeling sassy.
And I got sass for days, right?
Yeah.
So welcome everyone to episode 3 of Dungeon Delvers. And his name is Gene,
His name is Rennie.
and
And together
together we
we
are
are
unconventional
unconventional
heroes.
heroes.
Again, lightning bolts. Yeah, lightning
We'll get it in
bolts,
post. We'll get it in
guitars.
post. In post. In post.
I like how we say that. We definitely don't have a
Oh yeah,
post.
it's a live show. Of course there's no post.
So today's episode, again, lightning bolts and sweet electric guitar riffs
And
are
like
definitely
an uncopyrighted electrical guitar riff.
yes, super uncopyrighted. Today's episode is all going to be about the Barbarian class and how to make anger management work for you. Um, this is a class that me and Gene have both explored on a personal level, and we thought it might be fun to share with you.
Yeah, what
This is
hundo.
specifically for 5th edition D&D. In case anyone was wondering, we're not just like, here's how to be a barbarian in real life. Step 1, drink blood.
Don't drink blood.
Yeah, please don't drink blood. So as always, a great place to start with these things is, as much as there is going to be useful information on this show, and we hope that you gain some insights or get a tip or two or something that helps you. These are mostly opinions.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, 99.99 fresh squeezed opinions.
I mean, what's the other actually real, or is it just more
unfiltered hatred.
I mean, we are doing the barbarian class. So.
Right. You have to have just a little bit
bit.
of hate in your heart to be a barbarian. So guys, welcome for anyone who just showed up. And we want to say, if you guys are in the chat and you're watching and you hear us talking about something and you're like, hey, I have a question about a thing that you're talking about. Or, hey, what about this thing that maybe you haven't covered? Please feel free to ask your questions. We will kind of endeavor to maybe ask them as time goes on. We have our lovely moderators kind of standing by, checking your questions. And, there are some cases where we might not answer your question immediately because it is, in the show itself, we will get to that topic, as time goes on. But in some cases, we'll go, hey, great point. Let's talk about it. Here's the thing. So yeah, I don't know, Gene, you got anything else before we get this thing started?
Yeah, and so speaking of questions, any questions we don't get to or are just funny or silly and you want to ask them, you can ask them during chat, like Rennie said, or save them for the end when we go to our fountain of reflection, as that will be where we will do some audience questions, and silly is fine. Also, on topic is fine. It doesn't really matter. We'll do what you want, maybe, or we won't. But yeah, let's why don't we delve into dungeon.
All right, you ready to lose an initiative? Because I'm so ready.
Yeah. Oh god.
Oh, not a strong start. Not a strong start.
Hold on, I fucked up our videos.
We're good. We're good. Of
course, they're not sized everywhere. Gotta resize them. But that's fine. Don't worry, people. This is just me doing tech stuff in the middle of doing this and probably losing initiative. Oh, shit.
Oh.
I actually... Oh, God. Sizing in the worst way. All right. Well, fuck that. I'll get back to sizing later. Not important. All right. We're doing it live. So, why be a barbarian? Well, there's many reasons to be a barbarian. I mean, you could be looking for inspirations of those who have this uncontrollable anger inside them, calling forth the rage. Those, if we're looking at some games like the God of War, being able to fight against titans, or we're looking at movies and pulp, you have Conan the Barbarian, which is
obviously
your iconic
obviously.
Barbarian, and his crimson mist that he flies into a rage. You know, you have those iconic like Frazettas of like people foaming at the mouth, berserking. You have mythology with like many different cultures, the Norse, the Celts, many people. You know, the word berserker comes, you know,
Literally.
from Vikings. There are plenty of comics. I mean, to go on, you know, I can't. A lot of pulp era stuff goes with like Berserk.
Well, I mean, I think that there's an obvious comic inspiration in the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, that is true. The Incredible Hulk is definitely, but he's a more transformationist of a. His rage becomes a physical transformation, but is definitely a comic way to look at it, especially with this boundless strength and endurance. I don't know. I'm trying. Oh, I mean, even you know, if you want to take like a silly character who you could maybe consider a barbarian with this like undying fortitude, Inigo Montero, or Inigo
Inigo Montoya?
Montoya. That's it. Listen, fuck you. Don't get on
Don't
me.
don't attack me.
I want initiatives. I'm a fucking high on fucking sugar. No,
You don't even know what to do with yourself.
but like when he's getting stabbed and just taking these wounds that should have felled him to get his vengeance, filled with hate and anger that boils him past that point that anyone can endure. So those are just some examples and inspirations I could draw from.
Right.
So I don't know, Rennie, if you have any ones besides the one, yeah.
No, those are all really really great examples. You know, it's anytime you've seen comics of just like, you know, or comics, movies, TV shows, whatever the case may be, of just someone, you know, roaring a mighty battle cry and just fighting through pain and you know, being able to last far longer than any normal quote unquote person should, just by the power of fury. Oh, and I'm gonna say one last one. Anyone who hasn't seen it, please go watch it. But the show, the Gendy Tartakovsky's Primal, is a freaking perfect example of a barbarian who is sort of like a man of the land, but you know, sometimes needs to give in to those primal urges to survive.
Brock Sampson from Venture Brothers.
Great one.
He preys
But
on their
again,
fear.
you know,
Preys on their fear.
right. But again, these are all just if you see people like that in media and you're like, I want to do that kind of stuff, Barbarian is the place for you. And kind of going off of that, the one of the reasons to be a barbarian is, you know, you enter a world, a fantasy world of danger and adventure, and you being a barbarian, everything and everyone around you is a weapon, whether they want to be or not. You as a barbarian, pretty much anything you put in your meaty paws can be used to terrifying effect, including your own self. You know, trust me, the mostly nude barbarian tearing through enemies is certainly a viable way to be. Um, but you know, one of the reasons that I personally like to play barbarians is these heroic feats of strength. Gene, you wanna talk a little bit about the
Oh,
kind of things you can accomplish?
yeah, like, you know, you can like flip wagons, punch out camels, you know, bend bars, lift gates. That's a Thaco reference of second edition for Mark
Oh God,
at all times. But you know, it's you can do these, you know, nearly impossible skill checks that other people likely can. You're strength based focus, and that gives you this like rage that lets you tap into something ferocious that you can do extreme things that others would find truly impossible, but for you there's a decent chance you're going to succeed.
yeah. For you, it's merely improbable as opposed to impossible. Think Trials of Hercules, right?
Hmm.
Um, Holding up that beam as a building is crashing around you while people get out, or whatever the case may be. Like, Barbarian is the guy who's going to be able to do those sort of fantasy level kind of feats of strength. And sort of tying right in with that is feats of endurance as well. Holding your breath while I mean, maybe you're like me and you want to choke hold a Yuanti over the side of a boat, and knowing that your constitution is fantastic and that Yuanti's constitution probably isn't quite as good, and sort of strangle holding someone underwater. It's a pretty messed up way to kill someone. Um, but those the sort of strength and endurance feats that are supernatural or heroic. Barbarian is the place to be. Gene, you want to talk about some of the ways they kind of affect the fifth edition D&D landscape a little bit?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, not only their strength, but I would say also they're so tough, and you keep hitting them and they keep on licking, but like you don't. It's hard. Yep, yep, it makes sense. It all checks out. Follow the logic train, crosses, and anyway, but they generally are pretty good at dealing high damage and consistent damage at the risk of being hit. They take risks and they get rewarded by dealing out punishment. And being this barbarian in nature, you are, you're ferocious. So you'll get in, you'll get in there, get into the thick of stuff, even though it might be detrimental to you because you're trying to get as much pain out there. But that means that you're going to have to risk yourself, but that's okay. That's what you're built for. That's who you are. And
Right.
and I mean, there's a part of you that I think Rennie will talk about as a fun role playing aspect that kind of goes hand in hand with this like strength, endurance, and ability to really dish out the pain.
I mean, yeah, so like sort of in game, Gene talked about like how you kind of affect the world, but sort of from like a meta perspective, have you ever looked at a problem and been like, man, if only I could just punch this problem until it's not a problem anymore? Barbarian's the way to go. It really lets you unleash your inner fury as a role player. And listen, any character can just sort of punch their way out of things, but the barbarian can do it with some real panache. Um, unlike a lot of other classes. Um, and don't think that the barbarian is uh this sort of like simple-minded, angry person who just only knows how to deal with their problems through fury. There is a sort of instinctual and primal aspect to barbarian that we're going to touch on as we continue through the video. But again, if you want to just scream bloody murder and tear your enemies apart limb from limb, you're going to be in good company with the barbarian.
Absolutely. And kind of going on that, they do, what some classes don't do is they're annoying to monsters. They're annoying and problematic to be in your face if you're a wizard or cleric. And so they do a great job of tanking or pulling aggro from and threats from other creatures so that your rogue can sneak around or your wizard's in the clear to line up that lightning bolt because you have your barbarian in there getting in people's faces, doing enough damage to be noticed that enemies want to focus on them, and that is kind of how they tank by getting this damage out there, being a threat at all times. And it really makes them kind of this robust class for both aggression and also a little bit of team defense opposed to personal defense because you're not personally defensive, but you really provide that team support of like, Just hit me. Look at me, hit me. I'm in your face and I'm hurting you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, and I talked a little bit about how Primal War, like barbarians, are more than just angry people with swords. And again, sure, sometimes you're an angry person with a sword, but there is this awesome thing that they kind of did in the barbarian class. At least I believe so. That there's a lot of thematics in the different barbarian paths that you can choose, and even just the base class itself. That there's a lot of thematical elements that really support their mechanics. So anyone can be angry, but how does you being angry really set you apart from other people? And there's just some certain class features and certain abilities that you might get that are they tell a story. And again, that story is definitely probably you know it's where does that rage come from? What is that? How is that rage represented? And there is a story there. And I think that Barbarian does a really good job of telling you a story and then supporting you on the game design side.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Um, and again, it's I think it's one of the reasons that people keep coming back to Barbarian, um, and why it's such a popular class.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I also think part of it is these thematics of you don't have to be the most skilled fighter because you make up skill with strength and just
And savagery.
exactly physicality. Just you're like, I swing this sword like a baseball bat. I'll just try
Right.
to. All right, Rennie. Maybe I'm in it tonight.
Yeah, maybe you're the initiative hero.
I doubt it. I doubt it. But, well, good things could happen, and we'll move on to the next room. Ooh, oh, I don't know. Oh, that's mine. Ah, I stole it.
That one is yours. That one is yours. All right. Oof. I don't think I'm gonna be able. I think it might be you tonight, man.
Oh, good. I get to steal. I get to make you tell about the barbarian you hate the
Oh
most.
God, I hate you. Oh God, I hate you. All right. I think we've had enough time. Let's see. Oh, 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 oh. All right, Nightbot, back on my side. That's what I like to see. All right, so I'll kind of start this sort of next room. We talked about why be a barbarian. Like, what's the sort of looking at this class, why choose sort of that role to play? And now we're going to kind of go into you've chosen to be a barbarian. What does that mean? So I think the first thing before we talk about anything else, we have to talk about that rage, that class. Your whole class is really built around this one feature. Um, and I think it's important to note that while yes, it's called rage, and that definitely evokes the sense of anger and fury and all these things, is that rage doesn't necessarily need to be those things. Um, you know, Rage can be interpreted in a lot of ways. In some cases of certain barbarian paths, maybe it's a transformative state where it's not necessarily rage or anger, but it's sort of channeling nature's like animal ferocity. In some cases, maybe you're infused with a spark of magic that you don't fully understand, and that when you get into this battle state, this magical essence or part of you begins to manifest in wild and sometimes unpredictable ways. Um, and so I guess the point, really what we're getting at here, is that don't just think rage, anger, right? Rage could be, maybe you were cursed, maybe something happened to you and your family, and like when someone, you kind of have that Hulk moment of like, don't make me angry, like please stop, you wouldn't like it when I'm angry. It's like maybe you don't like that state that you go to, but like you hit a certain point, someone draws some blood from you, and you kick over into this state of existence. So, and don't get me wrong, and there is certainly some barbarianism that's just like, I get mad, and my mad is so mad that I'm madder than any person has ever been mad. And that is sort of how you do it. But just looking at rage as it does, you can interpret it in more ways than just anger. That it can be transformative. It can be an altered state of consciousness. It can be more than just angry punch. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, and I think on that, it's like it can also be even the release of logic, where you kind of like just let your instincts take over, and that is your rage, where it's like this ferocity and yeah, exactly, uh, anger building, fury, vision blurring. Oh, he's doing it again. No, really, this time it's really building.
you lifted a bus once, man.
It was going
Uh,
up downhill.
Right. And again, kind of coming in from that same angle, if you want to say that maybe you do have this wellspring of rage that cannot be, that does something to you, maybe think about what happened to you in your background, in your backstory, in your upbringing. And again, D&D being D&D, you don't need your whole village to have been attacked by orcs and watching your parents die in front of you. It is certainly a viable option. But thinking of like, hey, what happened to you that you have this thing inside of you that you can tap into? Like, is it a place of trauma? Is it maybe you saw something that you can't explain, or whatever story that you want to tell with that. Because I know from personal experience, I've played a barbarian where the rage is less of, it started out with maybe just base anger, but as time went on, it came to like a connective state with his past and his ancestors, and sort of like, it was not just like his strength, it was the strength of the people that came before him kind of bolstering him. And it was just a way that I interpreted it. And again, mechanically it did everything that rage does, but the story of it was not just grr.
Yeah, angering at the
um
gods.
yeah, so Gene, you wanna talk about a little
Yeah.
bit about the mechanical side of that?
Oh yeah. So I mean, besides this altered state of consciousness, the basics of when you be a barbarian, you are the highest hit point, uh, a possibility in D&D. Plus, you have an unarmored defense, which is based off your constitution. So by having a high constitution, you're gonna have more hit points. You're gonna have more hit points and a pretty good AC, and that really plays into your durability and survivability, because with the rage, your anger, that makes it so damage is generally not as bad from most of the sources of damage you will be taking, and so it makes your hit points really a bang for their buck, where everyone, and like, I've played in countless games, and even in some of the new games I'm playing, where I'm like, oh boy, I'm third level, I got 28 hit points because I'm a fighting class, and our barbarian already has 45, and I'm just like, Jesus fucking Christ. Like, I'm like, holy fuck, your AC
why
is,
why do I even have hit points?
yeah, I
Like,
was like, what are these for? And I think,
Gene, why don't you talk about abstraction as well? No, I mean,
oh
make your
boy,
point,
oh
obviously,
boy.
but just kind of roll it together. And I mean, I'll jump in too, but I
Okay,
think
so
they're so
so
connected. You know
so
what I mean?
yeah, those are just the two things. But let's talk about hit points. So we're gonna do a little subcategory, which is hit points. What the fuck are they, and what do they mean? Because I can get hit by a lightning bolt and that does 30 damage, or you hit me with a sword and I take 6. But in our terms, like in real life, that shit's gonna kill you or do some serious damage. So I think the representation of hit points is kind of an idea of combat endurance, and then mixed with, like, you don't really start taking true traumatic wounds until you're taking death saves and or died, because you can be healed from 0 hit points up into back to full health almost instantaneously with some powerful magics. But like, there's no rules for a broken arm without like custom homebrew stuff. And so to consider it I think that a lot of damage and combat is represented in like a fatigue. And I think your hit points kind of represent that. It's like your vitality. It's like, it's scrapes, minor cuts, bruises, instead of, even though like certain things are like you get multi attack or you get one or two attacks around, I really think that it's a clash of blows. When I'm thinking of a combat round of 6 seconds and you take damage from people, I'm considering it's probably more of a rolling fight, even though we have to break it up tactically in the rules in 6 second segments, in quotes that take forever. It's like that's actually the give and take and the flow of battle moving around you. Like a fireball does tremendous damage, but really it's a quick flash burn. It's not like a lasting impact. And so that's why it does a bunch of hit points, but it's not always fatal. It's like when a firefighter kicks open the door and the air gets in and it blasts out. Like that probably isn't going to kill you, but it's going to hurt a shitload. And if you're not wearing the proper stuff. And so that's where it's kind of looking at hit points. I kind of like to look at it as, like I said, this abstract where it represents multiple things. And there are some people who want to do it quite literally, like my sword does damage. That's how many hit points I have. Therefore, that equals my life force. It is my total life force. I like the idea of that it is a mix of both how well you can shrug off wounds, how just tough you are, versus like someone hits you with a sword for 13 damage. Well, while that is an impressive number, maybe it was a glancing blow due to your training and or instincts, getting slightly out of the way. And so that's that. I think that kind of covers what I like to think of when I think of hit points. I don't know about
Yeah,
you.
no, I think I think it's well said. I mean, hit points has always been an abstraction, and just kind of going off what Gene said, I don't like, and listen, everyone plays the game differently, and there's mostly not a wrong way to play, um, unless you're being an asshole to other people. But like, I don't like to tell people my hit point totals, and that's just me. It's very much like, I look fresh. I look like I have a few scuffs, and then maybe if I'm past half, ooh, I look like I have a grievous wound, or I'm breathing heavy, or maybe I'm limping, or something like that. Like now, I'm really feeling the drag of the fight. And then again, if you get lower again, maybe quarter of your health, this is where someone got a good blow on you, and maybe you have a neck wound that's bleeding profusely, and it looks like, oh, you're in dire straits now. So and again, each table is going to be a little different on how you sort of represent that abstraction that is hit points. Um, but I think it was an important thing to kind of talk about here, because as a barbarian, you are generally speaking going to have the most hit points in your party, and you are going to eat the most swords, lightning bolts, fireball. You're going to eat the most attacks and damage. And so, how do you explain, like, yeah, no, I got attacked 44 times, but like, yeah, I'm cool. Like, don't sweat it, And how do you sort of represent that abstract? And you know, again, it's not something you need to entirely define, but just it's a good consideration to have in this sort of class talk. I'll get you off the hook, Gene, and I'll talk about our next point here.
Cool, cool.
Um, so one of the hallmarks again of the barbarian class is reckless attack, right? And this is sort of like, again, as a fighter, you have this training you fall back on. You have a style that defines how you approach combat. As a barbarian, you ain't got time for all that. Your weapon is heavy, maybe sharp, maybe not. And if you hit someone enough with said heavy weapon, they're going to go down. And reckless attack is a great is I mean, it's an awesome way for you as a barbarian to kind of keep the attention on you, because if you're constantly hitting your opponents, you are going to be a threat that has to be dealt with, and gaining advantage on your attacks, while very good, has this sort of double-edged sword of granting advantage to your enemies, and so you make yourself a tasty target for bad guys while laying out damage to said bad guys. And it's a really it's a good mechanic to kind of represent that, like, this is why people focus on you, because you kind of go all out. It's an all or you do all these all or nothing swings. You got your all haymakers and axe fist strikes, as opposed to like precision blows and measured defense. You're like, nah, no time for that. Um, and again, reckless attack supports a lot of the other barbarian features, and they hopefully give you enough stuff on the back end with rage and other class features you might pick up that you can survive your recklessness, and maybe you have a friendly healer to help along the way. But reckless attack is one of those. It's situational, but most situations call for it. But there might be times where you're low on hit points, or it just doesn't make sense
or
because of
or you're out of rages.
right, you're out of rage. Maybe the battlefield environment just doesn't lend itself to doing it. But I would say 8 times out of 10, probably, reckless is the way to go. Gene, you want to talk a little bit about danger sense and the
Oh
primal
yeah.
awareness?
So kind of going on with that like instinctual and character. Uh the one of their small and quickly learned abilities is this danger sense. It's kind of so it's like their
Danger sense.
danger. It's like their ears, their eyes, their senses are honed that they may pick up on subtle cues that other characters don't. And so that kind of translates them to being very able to avoid damage and traps from large area effects that they can see coming. Because the idea is, in that moment when they maybe they taste that ozone before the lightning bolt, so they're instinctually their hair raising, already jumping to the left or ducking down and hunkering up. And so this represents their kind of their like instinct of like they're constantly and obviously like if you're playing this barbarian, you're probably most barbarians, not all, are likely from uncivilized or heavy nature influenced regions, or even mobile nomadic people who are or tribal or clans, and so they're constantly in a sense of danger from threats beyond. They don't have castle walls protecting them always, and so they are naturally honed to be ready for anything, to be ready for any combat, to be in a moment's notice fly off the handle. And I think that danger sense really supports that kind of story, this instinctual warrior who's not like honed and centered like the monk or well trained like the fighter. No, this is just pure primal power, ferocity honed to a nice edge. Um, and kind of going, I think, forward with that, they are living weapons. Um, they don't really need much, They don't need armor unless you want to be a sweet armored barbarian. Always cool, half plate's dope. But you don't, because you have an armored defense. You really need something to hit someone with, or not, depending on what barbarian you go.
Yeah, sometimes you are that thing to hit someone with.
Yeah, also what race or lineage you play. You might get natural armed attacks that you don't need these things, and so they don't really need much equipment. I mean, sure, a wondrous item here or there that helps them do things that they are not quite capable of, but also things that like give them spells aren't as useful because while they're raging, they can't really use them. They can't concentrate on things. So if you give them something magic, maybe a weapon, and then some cool goodies, pretty good as a barbarian. um, yeah, but I don't know. Anyone want to take any other additions for that?
No, I think you did a pretty good job. That's kind of the nice thing about Barbarian. If you're ever in any of those situations where you're like, oh, you wake up in jail, all of your stuff has been taken from you. As a Barbarian, you're like, that's slightly unfortunate, but like, they can't take away angry, you know, um, and they can't take away your rippling muscles. So like, the Barbarian is a kind of the Barbarians and the monks are probably two of those classes that thrive the most, even when deprived of maybe a lot of their gear. And counting them as living weapons, I don't think is uh, an an untrue moniker. But kind of with this living weapon, not only are they kind of this strong and hardy class, but they also have this ability to be fast to the fight, right? And I mean, there's a little bit of like mechanical design that goes into this because barbarians need a little bit of support in this arena, but there is also a little bit of thematics of just like, you know, maybe you were raised by wolves, quite literally. Um, and you know how to move. You just know how to move on your feet faster than other folk. And there are other features you have like feral instinct and Tasha's new instinctive pounce that really speak to the mobility of barbarians. And again, another way that kind of sets you apart from other martial classes is that you're a little quicker on your feet. You know how to move around a little better than most. I mean, you're not monk bananas fast, um, but you you still know how to haul ass when you need to. Um, and yeah, so that's another great reason of what it means to be a barbarian. Um, Gene, you want to talk about brutals as fuck?
They are totally brutals.
Super brutals.
So they get this ability that is very unique to them, which is a brutal critical. There's very few things that enhance your critical damage, besides being a half orc, realistic, and maybe taking certain feats. There's really nothing that makes that better except for being a barbarian. And I think kind of that purpose is that you butcher your opponents. You really swing like you're chopping down a tree. And humans are not very good trees. Um and so as opposed to the like fighter who the champion can crit on 19 and 20s, you with reckless can just throw more dice at the problem and have that 1 in 20 chance on 2 dice to attempt to hit that critical. And when you do crit, the higher level barbarian you are, the more dice you deal. So, and everyone loves to crit. You see it on countless of these shows or podcasts where people are
Right.
like fucking cheering when their friend crits. But as a barbarian, that likely is going to be, you're going to get cheered a whole lot because you
Yeah.
you just roll more dice. And that is kind of where being totally reckless as fuck, as Rennie and I like to say, really just pays out because you're just gambling in a positive way. Because if you get that crit, well, then that enemy might not get that reckless attack with advantage back at you because he's dead, or she's dead, or they're dead.
Yep. Yep. And yeah, no, and it's funny because brutal critical, it's always great to crit, and sometimes you feel good, but like the dice don't always cooperate. But with brutal critical, like you're throwing so many dice that like you're bound to at least make a good showing of your crits. But kind of piggybacking off of that, one of the coolest parts of Barbarian is that you can have these like hero moments because you're so hard to kill. You have class features like relentlessly rage and persistent rage that just keep you going. And your rage is it's everything to Barbarian. You always want to be raging, no matter maybe not when like you're on watch and like cooking, boiling up some water for tea for the party, but to each their own. Uh, um, but anytime that there's a fight or a throwdown, you want to be raging, and you can truly take staggering amounts of damage and keep on trucking. And you can have these really, knowing you have these high hit points can also let you be a little risky and let you pull off some like some more wild and dangerous actions than other classes might attempt, like jumping off buildings and standing in the way of a speeding wagon coming down a hill so that maybe you can save someone in the pathway of it because you're the toughest boy or girl out there, and you can take it because you are damn hard to kill. Uh, and Gene, you want to talk a little bit about this primal power source that they call their own?
Yeah. So kind of keep going with that, where they have this hard to kill. They also have this ability where, because of their ferocity, because they have always lived on the edge and they're extreme, it gets represented by the extreme. It
Extreme.
it really gets it really highlights in their kind of capstone and uh high end ability where they you're gonna generally be strong to be a barbarian. It's just probably part of the class. Not saying you can't play a not strength barbarian, but that seems really silly. Since all your stuff is but they get this ability called Indomitable Might. And it just says, oh cool, if you make a strength thing and you fail, it just equals your strength score. And likely as that, you're probably going to have a 16 to 20 strength by that point. So it makes it nearly impossible for you to fail these easy strength checks, and then likely even harder strength ability checks. And then their amazing end game ability, which is a persistent +4 stat bump to 2 stats, strength and con, which are their primaries, that also bring you above human or humanoid maximum. So you could be rolling around stronger than giants
Mhm.
because you have lived this life.
Yep.
And that is literally insane. Like 20
And it
strength is ridiculous. 24 strength is insane.
is yeah, it's just straight bananas. And and listen, it's the only class that has baked into the core class is your stats get better. Like you've gotten this far, you lived this long. Here's a present. Here, this is for you, and it's strength and con, and you always want more of that.
Yeah,
Always,
because heck, that even raises your AC because
yeah.
by a lot, you're going to be tougher than people in plate mail. It's if you do everything perfect.
hmm Yeah. Yeah, no, and like they, Barbarian is often multi-classed with a lot of classes, and some people who don't, Q Q Grog, uh, but oh no, he did multi-class in the end, didn't he?
Took
Man,
battle,
he even
took,
fucked up my analogy.
took battle mastery.
Uh, yeah, I mean he's smart. But no, it does. There's a really great payout at the high end for single classing. Now, there's a lot of ways, and not a lot, but there's enough ways in D&D to raise your stats. So maybe it's not always enticing, but in low magic settings, you kind of can't beat core stats going above 20. And kind of going with that, barbarians in their combat roles, we kind of talked a little bit about that as we went through this, but to just kind of break it down to a little bit more, D&D mechanic and sort of how that gets digested on the tabletop and on paper. You're always a tank, no matter what barbarian path you take. Some are more tanky, some are less tanky, but because you take half damage from the most common damages out there, and you have the most hit points of the party pretty consistently, you're always a bit of a tank. And then, kind of off of that, you will see barbarians often with giant axes. And there's a reason for that because using a giant axe, using a great axe, using a great sword, you know, with those brutal criticals and doing reckless, big weapon means big damage. And it's always, as a barbarian, that's always kind of your goal. There's always the possibility of doing two weapon or kind of sword and board where single weapon and shield. um and again, two swords or two bladed weapons is never a bad thing. It means you're going to make a one more attack than other barbarians generally, but certain barbarian paths kind of give you that attack, that bonus action attack, so you don't need to go two weapons. But it's certainly viable under certain builds. Um, and shield and main hand weapon is always viable. That shield giving you AC bumps is always nice. And then again, there are some builds with certain feats that you can maybe shield bash your opponents and kind of give a little extra crowd control to the barbarian, where they do get it here and there, but it's definitely not what they're known for. Um, and then kind of the last thing is grappler, and grappling is a little bit of advanced strategy and advanced playstyle, and you kind of have to accept that you're going to get your ass whooped a lot because you're going to be so close and in the fray. But barbarians, coupled with their rage, their damage bumps, their ability to shrug off a lot of damage, make excellent grapplers. Especially if you're making a lot of athletics checks to get those grapples in. If you're raging, you got advantage on strength skill checks. So they make really excellent grapplers. Um,
And also
so
at that high end, Apple check can't be below your strength.
yeah,
Boop and a boop
yeah.
boop.
So if your monster just is like, well, I got a 15, you're like, that's too
That's
bad.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah. So and again, I'm sure there's polearm weapon. Master barbarians is certainly viable, and there's other ones that we haven't talked about. But you're gonna kind of be, what flavor of damage are you doing? Are you hockey jerseying someone over their head and knocking them in the side of the head? Are you picking up the biggest weapon you can find and smashing it into someone? The world is your oyster as far as that's concerned. Gene, you want to talk about a little bit of their impact out of combat as opposed
Yeah.
to in combat?
So out of combat, obviously strength is a tool. And it's their primary tool. When when everything looks like a nail to you, and you have the hammer, it's your penis. No, no, your hammer is your strength. It's like that scene where, like the bandits laid a tree in the middle of the road. Well, guess who's lifting that goddamn tree? Probably you. You know,
Right.
you generally you have a link to nature, whether that is supernatural or just living outside of castle walls. They have the ability to get access to a lot of skills that aid in this in utilizing abilities that will help while adventuring. Again, Rennie mentioned this already, but that athletics, man. Anytime you can make a strength based skill while raging, which you can use them because you get a bunch a day, you're gonna get advantage, and that's incredible. And then also, kind of, so some of extra stuff that's happening with Tasha's release. If you're playing with optional class features, you get additional skills at third and 10th, and that makes you able to help your party out and be supportive, you know, through skill based support in your group. So you can flush out some weaknesses, maybe if, like, oh, no one has a high perception, well, you got that skill, or you have a high survival for tracking or foraging, or you're the scary person, so you took intimidate, like, and now you can flush out that by just keep adding skills opposed to just the two you're locked into. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, besides that, yeah, you're lifting, you're breaking things, you
You're
know,
pumping. You're pumping it out.
you're pumping iron, you're Arnold. Allah, and yeah, but that's kind of what I got about outside of combat. You're big, you're strong, and it's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I think that kind of covers what does it mean to be a barbarian. And now we're gonna go a little deeper in our dungeon, and we're gonna look at barbarian paths and sort
Which
of talk about
is,
those. But before we do that, initiative time.
yeah. Well, you won last time, so you roll first.
Oh, thanks, buddy.
No problem. Let's see what. Oh God,
What's up? What's up? What's up, homie? How you doing?
not good. I rolled too
You
soon.
didn't even wait. You waited no time at all.
Listen, I was trying to get the instinctive advantage like a barbarian would.
Ah, nice little
Which
throwback there. I
did
see what you're
not. I
doing.
didn't pay out, but I just wanted to let you know I tried.
Yeah, if you were a barbarian, Gene, you'd have advantage on this check.
Maybe I am. No, we determined I'm a rogue. Anyway,
Yeah, very true.
all right. Well, Rennie, I guess you get to start us off, and therefore maybe don't have
Yeah.
to talk about the thing you don't want to.
Yeah, I will if you want me to, but all right, guys. So, Gene, I'm gonna kind of do the first two. Just I'll roll them together.
Wow, really? I think you should just do one. No. I'll do.
We got a badass over here. All right, so guys, as a lot of times you're gonna hear in our sort of class breakdowns, it's always about telling a story through the choices you make, right? And when you take your paladin oath, when you take your fighter class subclass, when you take your barbarian path, when you take wizard school, doesn't matter. Think about what story you're telling with that choice. Are you a path of the beast? Do you have some sort of lycanthropy in your bloodline? And it's manifested when you are in this emotional state that you can tap into a beast, a bestial rage. Is it a curse that has befallen you and that forces you to turn into this hexen wolf or hexen beast? And again, it's just what story are you telling by the choice that you made? And sometimes it's best to kind of think about that before you get to that third level where you're going to take one of these paths. Um, and maybe sort of start to tell that story or sort of the preliminaries before that story begins to kind of flower when you choose your barbarian path. But yeah, always try to tell a story based on the choice you're going to make. And essentially also don't feel beholden to what's written on the page, right? So just as a quick example, the totem warrior, a very popular barbarian. The totem warrior for bear makes you toughest barbarian, right? You can resist all damages except for psychic. And I made a barbarian that was path of the totem warrior bear, and instead of bear, though, I flavored it as crocodile. So as opposed to like shaggy fur and whatever the sort of like bear like strength, I kind of flavored it that it was like crocodile skin and a hardening of those features. And so again, you don't. It doesn't. If it says and even with beast, there's nothing saying that you can't be a. You take on the aspects of dinosaurs. When you get grow a beast, maybe you grow jaws as that choice when you rage. You can say you get a fucking T Rex mouth. Again, you can't grow in size, but you can certainly kind of have that flavor that your rage is a little bit more based in this direction, that direction. And really what it comes down to is, you know, D&D is all about customization. And it always kind of had um so there is flavor out there, and if you want to tell a story and none of these paths are like, this is exactly the story I want to tell, it just doesn't fit for one reason or another, reflavor it. Talk to your GM, because I'm sure that there is a middle ground that you can find to tell the story that you want to tell, and that your GM wants to tell with you. And I will start off with the first path, and one of my personal favorites is Ancestral Guardian. Um, these are barbarians that when they rage, they call upon the power of their ancestors. Maybe and this can take many forms. This can take this sort of like almost Viking esque, where you begin a battle hymn and you start to sing the praises of the great deeds of warriors in your family as time goes on, and as you kind of call out their names, maybe spiritual or ghostly figures appear around you as allies in battle. Um, maybe maybe it's a little bit more like this sort of tribal thing where you have tattoos on your body, and each one represents a story of your people, of your lineage, and the journey that they had to go through. And when you rage, these tattoos sort of come to life, and they summon forth these ancestral guardians to help you. And again, however you manifest it, there is in my humble opinion, there is no greater tank on this page than ancestral guardians. You get to beyond the normal barbarian fighting an enemy, and they're in your face and you're easier to hit. You essentially make it not only advantageous to hit you if in theory you go reckless, but you make it very disadvantageous to go after your friends and not you. So you entice your DM, or you entice your enemies to focus on you even more than say other barbarians. Um, and on top of that, you get a damage reducing ability for your allies. And again, no other barbarian really reduces damage for other people. They're all about reduces damage for themselves. And it makes you a great team player. And again, depending on how you manifest your ancestral guardians, is sort of how you can manifest your spirit shield that protects your allies. But I can tell you with certain abilities kind of comboing. Me and Gene literally are playing a campaign right now where we do this, where he has a character who's a warlock, and he uses Armor of Agathis for temporary hit points, and I have this ancestral guardian barbarian who reduces damage dealt to him, making that spell even more worthwhile for him.
And also triggering Sentinel because they're always focusing on you.
Right, right, and that's another thing, is that Gene's character has taken Sentinel because our characters are very close in the game, and we have kind of developed a sort of duo fighting style where I take a lot of attention, and when those creatures give me that attention that I'm asking them for, Gene punishes them, from a flanking kind of position, and it works out pretty good sometimes. Um, but yeah, and kind of the last piece I'll talk about before we move on is I feel like that the Ancestral Guardian has great thematic abilities. Their 10th level abilities just gives you spells that again, barbarians spells, not really, there's not really a lot of overlap on magic and barbarians. But it's just really good thematics. You summon, when certain wizards or clerics use these spells to be like, I summon a magic eye. You don't summon a magic eye, you summon Uncle Bob. And you're like, hey, Uncle Bob, could you go and check on this thing for me? And again, we're simplifying, but it's really cool story opportunities to bring your background, your characters, family, lineage to life through the role play of this sort of abilities. So yeah, Ancestral Guardian is awesome tanks, and no one's gonna be sad that you're around.
All right. So I guess I will take this one.
Woo!
This is the Path of the Battle Rage. Generally, it is restricted to dwarves, but that is only for the Forgotten Realm setting and GM dependent. Because who's to say with this lineage system that you could not have been raised by dwarves?
Right, right.
And they really focus on their okay Battle Rager armor. It's good. I mean, it's as good as Scale Mail. But they are focused on this like spike covered thrashing armor. and
It comes with diapers too, right? That armor, like, it has built-in diapers, so when you're pooping
Rennie
yourself.
really does not like this class, this
Well, the
subclass.
problem is that I like dwarves so much, and, like, the source material Battle Ragers are based on is really fun, and then they were like, "We're gonna give you a class,
Yeah.
guys, and it'll be cool," and they gave you Battle Ragers, and you're like, "Who would do this? Who
So
would do
so
this?"
let all right. Let me break down what they get, and then we can discuss how it might be improved. I will say, if I'm to judge with my humble opinion, it is probably one of the more underpowered subclasses. Um, they get this armor, which is okay armor. You might even be better not having armor at that point, just because of unarmored defense. Um, they get a free bonus action attack with the armor, which is cool because not many barbarians get a bonus action at least for free without having to do something cool or taking an exhaustion or specifically picking that path. Um kind of at mid level or the beginning of them really coming into their own. They can start whenever they use the reckless action, which the way they are kind of described for role play is they are 100% reckless. They can
All the time.
they can just give themselves free temps, and it's not a lot of temps, but with the amount of hit points you have as a barbarian, mixed with your damage reduction while raging, you can really juice out those those uh those temps. And that kind of gives them a little bit more survivability. Um they're good they're good grapplers because A, they're a barbarian, but B, they have side effects where they do a little damage anytime they grapple. Uh Reddy hates it.
It's
But
it's
I
just so poopy. It's just so
it's
poopy.
not a lot of damage. It's not a significant amount of damage, unlike
It
certain.
also doesn't scale with play. That, if it
Yeah,
started at one number and then went up as you went up, I maybe would be more forgiving. But like, it starts at 3 damage
yeah.
and never gets better. And if you're an 18th level battle ranger doing 3 damage to people who hit you, you're like, okay,
Well, it's a grappling, so it's
whatever.
not even hit you.
Grappling, like,
That'll happen. That'll happen
okay.
later. So yeah. They then get this charge, which is a 10th level ability. It's cool. They get the bonus action dash, which is awesome. But due to the instinctual pounce that was recently released, I think Battle Ranger definitely needs to get a look at to be brought up to snuff. And then their last ability is really cool because when they get hit, they just deal 3 damage to people while raging. But the problem is it's just 3 damage. So yeah, they can take 1,000 hits, and you'll deal out 3,000 damage, which is cool. But
But
it's not. It doesn't scale. Like maybe if it were tied to your con bonus or to your proficiency or anything that went up a little bit, I think it could be a little bit more in line with some of these more powerful. As I like to say, it's kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts, or for Rennie, death by 1,000 poops, because he
so many
really,
poops.
really hates them. I'm reading them, and they're cool, but I think
Don't listen to him.
they need a little bit. They need a little bit of shine and
They need some
polish.
TLC. To be perfectly honest, I think that subclass, now that some time has passed since it has been released, I
Yeah,
think it needs some TLC to come in
and
line
the
with
big
some
thing
of the other
is
ones.
the story of them is really cool, and it makes sense why they're in Forgotten Realms. They unfortunately, I don't believe, live up to their fluff material.
Well, to their novelization, yeah, certainly not. Certainly not. I don't know. Maybe me and Gene will put out like a Dungeon Delvers Battle Rager, because again, I love dwarves specifically. I'm a big fan of the Battle Rager, and it's just a bit of a shame to see them on paper not really that cool. But we're gonna move on from them, or I'll just poop on them all fucking
100%.
night. Next up is the Path of the Beast. This is one of this one is pretty dope. If you anyone here watches the Curse of Strahd stream run by the fabulous Julia May Staley, you might recognize Gremin Mardukov is a member of the Path of the Beast Barbarian Club. And honestly, the first thing I love about the Path of the Beast is that it's super thematic. Do you want to play Wolfman, where you like tear your shirt and roar and howl at the moon, and you have like claws
Yeah.
and or teeth,
Who
or
doesn't want to be Michael J. Fox?
right? Exactly. Do you want a Teen Wolf, but as a barbarian, and maybe with still a basketball? I don't know. Um, why werewolvism and basketball went together, I still will never know. But I still love that movie. Um, but yeah, the thematics on them is phenomenal. You get to literally transform, and that's always fun. No matter if you take it in this sort of Wolfman range, this sort of like I was saying, a dinosaur way. Heck, you could be a were shark, quote unquote. And you could shark out when you beast Path of the Beast. And honestly, maybe you could go full on chimera, and maybe each time you transform, you channel a different nature aspect, because that's just the story that you've chosen to tell as Path of the Beast. Um, and that's sort of that idea of that you can kind of take these guys in any direction with flavor and thematics. It kind of holds true in their class features as well. Every time you rage, you kind of choose the form of rage. Teeth, claws, tail, and these, and again, maybe not at low levels when you only have a few rages, but when you're at higher levels and you kind of have rages to spare, it can be a lot of fun to like mid fight, start out with claws to try to start shredding up your foes, take some damage, and then re-rage with teeth, and then get some health back. Like, there's some really cool fluid choices you can make as you are playing a Path of the Beast barbarian. Another great thing about them is that they have very good mobility. Mobility. Getting climb speeds and swim speeds, fantastic. It really lets you master your environment, which can prove very useful depending on the scenario. Um, you get a little bit of crowd control again with them. With you can sort of with that like shared frenzy or cursed, whatever it's called, the cursed thing where you kind of share it, but you can redirect attacks. So depending on the foe that you use it on, and again, if if it lines up right with having another enemy nearby, you can really kind of make the giant smack the ogre mage. And let me tell you, that ogre mage is gonna be real sad if he gets smacked by a giant. Um, and their capstone at level 14 is so good for not only themselves to be this, again, really great, get in the fray and shred your enemies, um, but it's also great for your allies. So honestly, Path of the Beast is I think a very strong choice. And again, it's a cool story. It's a lot of fun to literally turn into something else if that's the way you want to go.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and also like it definitely it really it lends itself with your ability to kind of change as you go and adapt. I think it really hones in on that like instincts and like being like, oh, what's we're dealing with? Okay, cool. Well, now I swim and I do this, or now I can
Right.
leap small buildings. Um, and then let us, start with the classic barbarian, the berserker. Um, the berserkers, they're just mean. They do one thing and they do it really well, and that's just lots of fucking damage. You're like, not only do you do regular attacks, but you can throw in an extra attack as a bonus action. That's three times the ability to crit. So you're really
Oh
you're
yeah.
you're crit fishing and also smashing as hard as possible. Then as you get more powerful and your rage becomes even more powerful, you get some unique defenses which are hard to come by as a barbarian. When you, while you're raging, can ignore charmed and frightened. It suspends it, doesn't end it, but if you're under the effect currently. But if you are not and you're raging, they don't affect you. And as a barbarian, being charmed or frightened can really affect your ability to perform because frightened you can't move close and you got to move close. And if you're charmed and hitting your friends, they are going to cry. Just literally,
They're gonna be very sad,
they will just start
very very sad.
crying in front of you, and you will realize it. The choices you've made. Um, they get a really neat crowd control, which I think really lends its ability to be like, I have boundless rage, and everyone should fear me. Everyone should look at you and be like, that guy,
Guy's got problems.
he's got badness, he's got darkness in him. He's angry. I spill milk and he's fucking flipping tables. Fuck. But it lets them kind of do a little bit of crowd control where they can frighten people in a 30-foot radius, and then they can just keep that frighten going, assuming people don't make their saving throw. And that's really really good, or at least a great way to make it that your enemies have disadvantage against your friends because they're so scared. And then their last ability is just it's just unfuckwittable, where it's retaliation and they can use their reaction to hit someone who hit them. So you're now a barbarian getting 4 attacks around, and ain't no one wants that. I mean, like, you want
That's
it because you're a barbarian,
right.
but your GM doesn't want that.
Yeah,
Like, you just punish people for fighting you, and it feels real good. I'll tell you, just
it
watching it
does.
happen. It seems easy. It seems quick because you don't got fancy tricks. But man, you might be a one-trick pony, but that trick is fucking brutal.
It's a hell of a trick.
And I think I'm gonna move on to Rennie, which I think is one of the most I think fun barbarian paths.
Oh, definitely, definitely. The next path we're going to talk about is the Storm Herald. And again, kind of like Path of the Beast, this is a path with great thematic qualities, and it really speaks to that primal power, right? This is a barbarian who doesn't rage with the ferocity of a beast, but rages with the ferocity of a storm, or like sort of nature itself. um and their thematics, and again, it can lend you to having some cool stories of like how you became the Storm Herald. Do you have a lightning rune etched on your soul, and that's how you channel these wondrous powers? Um you know did you did you get blessed by some primordial being or essence that kind of infused part of the land with you? And again, there's a lot of stories to be told, but there's some really cool kind of nature and warrior coming together as one. So their thematics are really cool. And they have some customization options. They're a little limited because you have to kind of choose what environment you're going to channel, and you can change it up every time you level. But when you choose it, you might be stuck with that environment for a long time. So again, it might be useful for you to choose. It's sometimes good in that sense to know what kind of story you're trying to tell. Because if you were drowning in the ocean, and some primordial water got into you and saved you from drowning, well, maybe you probably do a lot of the water based storm heralding. And again, each one, and again, and sometimes there's a, hey, this level, I'm going to try this out and see how it goes. But there is a little bit of a limitation on their customization. The nice thing also with this path is that you get some decent utility depending on the environment you go with, and kind of the play style that you sort of decide that you want to adopt. There is some good utility and ways to affect your battlefield around you and your enemies. Also, getting an additional resistance, always nice. Not a lot of barbarians get the additional resistances beyond the 3 they start with. And so being able to get that additional resistance, super nice. Um, They also, some of their abilities make them really good team players, as they can hand out some nice benefits to their allies around them. And then sort of at their high end, they have some good crowd control. Again, it's not stupendous, but as a barbarian, anytime that you can hit people really hard and do something additional is great. It's great. And they kind of, again, Path of the Storm Herald is definitely one that I would say you kind of want to look ahead a little bit at where you want to go, um, because you get so locked in depending on your environment you channel. So choosing how you want to be on the battlefield, choosing how you like sort of how you fight with your team and all that, like letting that inform what environment you take will kind of inform also how you limit the battlefield. I mean, plus they're just dope. Like they're just dope. Having an aura of fire around you, having an aura of lightning around you, like it's just it's just cool. So I mean, that's pretty much all I have for Storm Herald. Gene, you want to talk a little bit about totemic
All
warriors?
right, this is probably the most OG, strongest out the gate barbarian. It's the favorite amongst many to multi-class, and it's just so good. And while Julia mentioned Barbarian, I think toward Beast, the real original Barbarian is the Totem.
Oh yeah,
So the
big time.
Totem Warrior, the idea is kind of like your tribe either worships a totem, or you worship this animal spirit, or there's a many different things. But the idea is that you have attuned with the natural world and a kinship with like animals of it. And now your totems don't have to be just like raw animals. It could be mythical creatures, the phoenix, the dragon, or it could be a crocodile, or it could be a bear, or it could be an elk, all the normal stuff. But you can always flavor whatever type of totem you think. And so like many they can ritually cast be sense and speak with animals, which is awesome because if you don't have that druid, or if you do have a druid, you can now have your barbarian communicating with them.
Oh yeah.
And the idea is that they kind of have this connection to the wild, which is more akin to like ranger and druidics, but obviously totally. Um,
Super brutals.
then when they hit their start of it, they get their totem, and each one of them are good in certain ways. So the main one that most people take, because it's amazing, is bear,
It's so good.
because you get resistance to everything except psychic. You're so goddamn tough. It's incredible. It really makes GM sad. Um, as a GM who's had to deal with this, I know this. It makes you sad. But if you're not going for that aspect, there's a few other options. Uh, so like there's one where you're like a very mobile barbarian with the eagle, dashing around, running away from hit and run tactics because people are going to be harder to hit you when you're leaving them. Uh, the elk lets you move real fast. You want to fucking outrun your monk for many levels. Elk barian with your walking speed going crazy. Uh, you can jump more if you're going for this like pouncing and kind of like springing into action with your panther like grace. Yeah, there we go, Conan reference. uh, and then if you really want to kind of be like the leader of the pack, where you're helping your allies, the wolf barbarian is pretty cool because it makes it so that your friends get benefits for attacking creatures that you're fighting in melee, like with their own melee. And that's kind of like their start. So their start kind of helps you define what style of fight you want to do, and also your totems can be customizable because every level, when you get another aspect or totem spirit, you can choose a different one. So you don't have to go bear, bear, bear. You can go bear, eagle, tiger if that's how you feel. Now
There you
they're
go, tiger.
there you go, tiger. Um, and so their utility is kind of flavorful for how you want to do it, because they're 6 level. Like the bear, you're super strong. You carry more. Great. That's cool if you're going to be using that aspect. The eagle makes you have incredible eyesight. It's amazing. The elk lets you travel faster with your group, so you get like some of that natural explorer stuff. I mean, the tiger gives you more proficiency. So if you're using Tasha's and you're a tiger and you're a barbarian, you're starting with 6 to 8 skills, or you're ending with 6 to 8 skills, which makes you really good at doing a whole lot of stuff. Um, and then the wolf kind of gives you that tracking aspect of like rangers, where you can just track at a normal pace, which is super cool.
Yeah.
Uh, and you can move. Oh, you can move really fast and track, and you can move stealthily normal, which is awesome. And then their next one is kind of to hone in with that ability of like nature and beast. They can commune, which allows them to like ask things about the terrain around them and like what nature is itself. So like, what kind of like if there's natural threats, or it's gonna rain, or if it's rock, they can ask. I don't know the exact details of the spell, but it allows them to learn about their environment going into it. And then lastly, their 14th level ability um kind of uh augments like their ending thing. So it's like the bear makes it so that you can draw aggro because people attack when they attack other people. They're not really good, like they have disadvantage. The eagle lets you fly, which is awesome because
It's huge.
barbarians, a flying madman does not seem like a happy thing, and also one of their weaknesses conquered. Um, the elk lets you knock people aside, which is super great for helping you and your friends. The tiger lets you fucking leap on people and then get that bonus attack that a lot of barbarians crave. And then the wolf lets you knock people prone, which is awesome. Pretty much when they hit. So elk, you run through, and so it's like it's kind of just another flavor to make you more effective and also help your friends, depending on what style of totem you go. And so I really enjoy their themes. I enjoy the ability because like you don't have to it does say you can have aspects like Rennie did scales with his Crocbarian, but it could also be like you have war tattoos or paint that you do before a battle, and it lets you get in, lets you hit this enhanced state that connects you with your totem, and maybe they see that kind of like spirit, almost like a spirit like hover around you, so like you look like you have a bear like over your attacks. And so it's like you can describe it depending on how you want to flavor it. It's all groovy. Just make sure it's cool with your GM. If you have a cool idea, I'm sure they could I feel like there could be a forest fighting bear, a Barbarian if you choose. All right. But also, Mark, I refuse to talk about the Duck Barbarian, so Rennie, I'll pass it to you.
All right. So the next one on our list is the Zealot, Path of the Zealot. Again, I think this has good thematics in a very specific direction. You know, generally, since it's about being zealot, generally it has to do with the god, or perhaps a darker force, if that is the direction you'd like to go. Demons or deities or angels or whatever have you. Um, and there is something cool, it's nice that there's an option out there that's not paladins, clerics. Listen, some gods, they don't need someone to make an oath to them. They don't need someone to give them worship. They need someone who will get the job done. They need someone who they can channel their deific fury through, and will keep on fighting no matter what happens, even if you drop a house on them. So I think there's some really good thematics in the Path of the Zealot. Again, if that's a story that you're interested in telling, having your character attached to a deity or deities. Um, First things first, zealots, they know how to bring the pain. As a barbarian, you're always about making sure you're dealing good damage. And literally, one of their first abilities immediately increases how much damage you do every round. So, you know, they definitely know how to uh, kill their foes in the name of gods or demons. Um, Another one of their really good abilities kind of makes them unkillable, and that's kind of a common thread amongst or throughout the path of the zealot is that it is really hard to outright kill you. Now, it is already a little harder to kill normal barbarians. This is kind of their whole shtick, but zealots take that a step further, that even if they are quote unquote dying, um, they can still keep on fighting. They can still keep on trucking. And it only gets more terrifying as time goes on, to really show that, through faith, through a deity's power, again, whatever story you're telling, whatever the case may be, you are not going to stop until whatever holy mission or holy purpose or not so holy purpose is fulfilled. Um, they do have some nice ability to kind of make a saving throw. Again, barbarians really suffer when saves come in with saves that they're not good at. So if it's not like a physical save, barbarians usually have a pretty bad time. So having something kind of in your tool bag that helps you with that, always good. Um, their other ability makes them excellent team players, as you sort of like, give a shout out to Asmodeus or Tyr or whoever is your bestie, and you make everyone have a round of advantage, and it's pretty strong. Advantage on attacks and saves. And what I really like about that is that not only is it a great offensive ability, there's plenty of characters and plenty of classes that really benefit from having that advantage, but it also gives you advantage on saves. So if you know some nasty creature with a fear effect is going to show up, uh whatever, any kind of aura or something, you could be like, you know what, I actually, as a barbarian, I can do something that's not just smashing my enemies to pieces, that can help my team, which is awesome. And again, they literally, their final ability is just too angry to die. And I mean, like, again, all barbarians are good at it. The zealot is just incredible at sticking at staying the course. Um, and again, that also lets you kind of have really, as long as you sort of have that faith and trust in your GM, is you can have some really cool moments where, like, you have like flesh ripped open and your ribs are exposed, and like, you have so much blood coming out of you that you're like, no person should be alive after what that person just happened to them. You should be dead. And in fact, maybe you are, you just didn't realize it yet, and you just keep going. So you can have some really cool hero moments of, having part of your face blown off and still fighting. And yeah, they're a fun path if that's the kind of story you want to tell. Gene, you want to get crazy with wild magic?
Oh boy. So Wild Magic, Path of Wild Magic is a new barbarian subclass, and it is awesome.
Super dope.
It's kind of, it's a roll of dice, but they're all good rolls. So they kind of get like a cool divine sense, almost like a paladin, but it's all based on magic. So they can essentially detect. They know where all spells and magic items are within 60 feet, and
It's like
also,
detect magic and divine sense had a
and you know
baby.
what school. But like that's really powerful in a way that people may not realize. because you're like, oh look, that guy's invisible, but he's wearing magical armor. Cool, I know where that magical armor is, so I know where that guy is. Now depending on your GM, they might be like, well, you still have disadvantage, but you know where the people are. You're like, oh, you're made of magic. I know where you are. And that's really neat, and that's kind of like that gives barbarians something you would not expect in their tools. Um, then they get a wild surge, and who doesn't like wild surges? They're great.
It's always fun.
It's always fun, except that every single one of these is not bad, which is crazy because wild surges should, I guess, be bad occasionally. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, their theme of like being a magic charged barbarian. Were you born near the Feywild? Were you born in the middle of a fucking magic hurricane? Did the fucking primordial mountains erupt right by Neverwinter in your birth? Who the fuck knows? We'll find out as a team when you write that cool ass story. But you are infused with this, and so they get a wild magic chart, and it's a D8. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they're all really cool. Some are beneficial to your team, some hurt people, some make you tougher, and a lot of them have unique properties that can be reactivated as a bonus action. And being a barbarian, you often just use your bonus action to rage, and then you twiddle your thumbs on your bonus action. And so it's really neat because not only does the effect go off when you rage, it also can then sometimes be reused every round. Now, this ability is just insane, and it has to be talked about.
It's crazy
which
town.
is bolstering magic. It is the fucking craziest because you can essentially either give your friends for 10 minutes a baby bless, or you can just restore a D3 spell slots once per day on a person. But, whoo boy, hello, I'm a walking pearl of power. Let me assist you, my friend. But, like, it's definitely a nice augment for, like, if you're a party that likes to push it and, like, sparingly take long rests, or if you're a party that takes a lot of short rests, but, like, the paladin or like, druid of your group is like, man, I don't got, or cleric is like, I could really use some spells back. You're like, I got you, buddy. And it also kind of goes into the idea of that, like, not only is your rage is tied to whatever anger you might have, but you have this well of unstable magic inside of you that you're learning how to make people. You're trying to help with it. You're a helper. Uh, then they get this unstable backlash, which is a really interesting reaction because it allows you to use your reaction to do a new effect of your wild magic, which means you get whatever the ability that procs, and also it kind of lets you keep rolling the dice because maybe when you rage, you didn't get the one you wanted because you have a tactical idea. You can kind of cycle through it because it's every time you take a reaction. So when you get hit, you take the reaction. So pretty much most rounds, you're probably going to be able to recycle as you go. And then lastly, they get to roll twice on the chart. And if they roll the same thing, they choose whatever one they want, or they choose one out of the two options. So it gives you a lot of versatility so that you can start tactically thinking of what wild magic affects as you've kind of mastered the wild magic path. But you or you more guide the river opposed to control it.
Right.
But I think it really has a very interesting story to tell, especially because when they kind of suggest it, it's not your atypical races that you would say for this for barbarians. Some like suggestions are like elf, tiefling, Aasimar, and Ganassi because they're otherworldly and they're trying to recapture that, Fey or weird,
Yeah,
devil.
they already have a connection to some other source of magic.
And so, yeah, I really think it's a very interesting take on Barbarian that I don't think you would also see. And also it kind of reminds me of one of my favorite versions of Barbarian, which was the Rage Mage, where you could bolster your spellcasting while getting angry, and so it kind of feels a little bit like that in a small way.
Oh, it's definitely Rage Mage, yeah.
And so I enjoy it. I think one of my next characters might have to be a wild magic barbarian.
Nice,
I haven't
nice.
decided what, but I think it might happen. So yeah.
I guess kind of the last thing we'll talk about before we move into our one of our last rooms is that, like, we described some of these abilities in a multitude of ways, and honestly we hope you do too. The nice thing about a lot of D&D and everything that you see printed and written in books, it's all open to interpretation. Now, some of the mechanics you should probably stick to. Talk to your GM. Um, but if you want to be a wild magic barbarian, but as opposed to sort of this arcane wild magic, maybe a deity got killed in your presence, and a burst of divine magic got exploded from him and is in you. Talk to your DM, and again, mechanically you're going to work the same, but as opposed to being arcane focused, maybe you're a little more on the divine side. Um, and again, these are just suggestions, and find the story that you want to tell with your primal warrior, and find the subclass or the path that fits the story you want to tell, and kind of go from there.
And I'm gonna answer 86 Me Daddy's question, which is, could you make an urban style barbarian a city bear, if you will, instead of a country bear? Um,
A city bear, that's great.
it's very good. But yeah, I mean, honestly, with a background, you can really define what style of play. So, like, you can be an urban bounty hunter, where you go, the city streets real well, but you use this path of whatever type of barbarian you go.
Right.
Or if I've definitely seen some games revolving around the city. What happens if your totem is civilization? Your totem is the castle. So you're a tougher, like, it doesn't always have to be everything, but like there's no reason why you couldn't flavor your barbarian. Yes, you could be a trash bandit, but you could be urchins. There are many backgrounds to mix and match with your class to really help make your definition of, like, you don't always have to play to the, like, the trope or the stereotype of, like, all barbarians are wild people. It's like, all right,
Oh, sure.
what happens if I'm just a tough city watch guy? So I chose perception and intimidation as my barbarian skills. I don't got any of those extra things, and then you
Right.
tag on something else depending on maybe you're a frenzier because you just lose control. You're a cop with a bad attitude. So, like, you can absolutely flavor your barbarians to be in an urban setting, a city setting, but I think they're designed mechanically as like a harsh environment survivor.
Yeah, and again, it might take a little extra work between you and your GM to make it work, or to make it fit. But, like, again, Gene said, you can draw inspiration from buildings. You could draw inspiration from those city animals. Like, there's a totem warrior who has tiger in there. Well, what about the alley cat or the tomcat? Like, there is plenty, or like wild dogs as opposed to wolf.
I would
There
like
is analogs that you can find.
I can play a
Wha
zoo barbarian. I'm
A Zubarian.
a
That
zoo
you have to
bear.
call it a Zubarian, and yes, you
Perfect.
totally can.
Magnificent.
Magnificent. Yeah, alright, so we're almost through this dungeon, Gene. And I'm not even that angry. I mean, except
I mean, you didn't
at
have to talk about Battle Ranger, so I
I
think
did not
I
have to talk about
really
Battle Ranger. I'm so excited.
I really pulled you
Um
out of that fire.
All right. Well, we have the next thing we're going to talk about is barbarian weaknesses. So let's roll some initiative and see who goes first.
I mean, DJ Poser assumes that it's rigged because I don't win initiatives, and then you are cheating out there.
I cannot confirm nor deny. Do you want to go first?
I went. I went
Ooh,
first.
yeah. Now, who's cheating? All right. Let's see if I can match. I already get a 20. I think I got a
You
20
did.
earlier.
You
I don't
did
think I
get
can
it.
do it. Nope.
Ooh, all right.
Nope. I'm out.
I think it's a. I think it's a. If you go first, wait. No, I don't know how it works. All right, so let's go with the biggest glaring weakness in the barbarian class, which is you're hyper focused on melee. Enemies
Yep.
at range can just are the worst. They're very your movement helps you compensate for that, but closing the distance and melee and taking damage are all features of your class that if you cannot take damage and cannot be in melee, kind of feel, in the quote from Rennie, like a ham sandwich. And it's
Yep.
just, you're just sit there and you're like, I do that. That's my whole turn. I'm done. And like, it doesn't feel good. As someone who plays that kind of melee with the amount of tools that other characters can have at their disposal, it does not feel good if you can't be. Unfortunately, you only brought a hammer in your toolbox, and
Right.
if that problem isn't a nail, it can be a little disheartening. So just be okay with that. Be and honestly, like your GM, I think if they are, and I'm not saying bad or good, but a good GM will try to make fun activities that maybe your strength can be shown off. Or if you're a creative player, you can always ask your GM to do insane things. Like, if
Why
so,
do I imagine barbarians doing macaroni art as fun activities their GM lets them do?
but like I know in a few games ago at Curse of Strahd, we had to close with a hag who was pretty far away. So Gremlin just leapt out of a tower
Yep.
where
Accurate.
it took me like 2 rounds to close the distance just walking. So there's some extreme things you can do to really make up for some of those weaknesses. Yeah, so I think that's kind of that is like my number one weakness in Barbarian, that just it's the worst and it's not great.
Yeah, flyers suck too. Flying enemies can really fuck you up. I'm going to talk about saving throws. Listen, if someone's asking you to make con or strength saves, you're just gonna flex it out. You're just gonna be like, yeah, yeah, let's do it. The moment someone asks you to make not one of those, you might be in for some problems. Deck saves tend to be okay, but again, just because you are such a physical character, charisma, wisdom, and intelligence saves really can be the bane of your existence. Um, and again, your GM is going to know these things. And you might find yourself at the target of a lot of dominates and charms and fears and stuff like that. And again, like Gene is saying, this is just something going into it, is just keep that in mind. Is that this is also a team game, and like, yeah, when you get charmed and all of a sudden you turn on your buddy with your eyes bloodshot and your axe over your head, let's hope that your friends are like, no, no, buddy, calm down, and they have an answer to that problem. But again, and as a player, you can look for items or keep certain potions or certain stuff on you to maybe help with that problem. Um, but mental saves are going to be really rough. Gene, you want to talk about control spells and how they suck for
Yeah,
barbarians?
yeah. I mean, kind of touching right off that, like confusion, slow, any of those things, difficult terrain, things that slow your momentum, like calm emotions, commands, things that will hamper you from being able to take your full robust murder. Um, it's rough. Like if you're not being able to take multiple attacks, if you can't take reactions, if you can't move as fast, if you're rolling on a die, or you're stunned. Like these are all awful, or paralyzed because you're held. Like these are all things that many spellcasters can do to you. So you need to be. Hopefully, your team is there at your party is there to help you with some of those. And now, there's nothing saying that you can't have high intelligence with charisma as a barbarian. Absolutely, you can do whatever you want. It's your character. But since you don't get proficiency in those saves, at the higher end of things, it becomes a little bit harder. Low level, maybe that roll the die, not as bad.
Right.
But as you
Right.
start getting into those higher tiers of play, there will definitely be a glaring spotlight when you're like, ugh, okay, I guess I'll make that charisma save.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's super true. Trust me, I've been on the receiving end, and it's rough, and you gotta roll with it. And so the next thing we'll talk about is their out of combat utility is a bit limited. Again, you definitely have a niche. Um, and again, creative players and using your skills creatively is always recommended. Uh, but again, a lot of your skills sort of lend themselves to this sort of outdoor specialist, survival, perception, um, and athletics, and just things that are going to be really useful when traveling, when trekking through dangerous terrain. And again, there's not saying that there isn't an application for it in an urban environment, but just your out of combat utility is going to be very limited. You will have, like Gene's been wanting to use. You have an answer to any problem that's a nail, and when problems start to be not so nail shaped, you're like, but hammer, and you just keep waving your hammer around, and people are like, we don't stop, please, we don't need that. You just might find yourself again, and this is one of those good moments that we kind of talked about when we talked about being a good player. Is this isn't your moment as a barbarian? You let your rogue and wizard to deal with picking locks or whatever the case may be. So you might find that your out of combat utility is limited, and again, you don't from like the barbarian list, and unless you have a background that really supports it, they don't get a lot of those social skills. Nor does the class put very much uh, need for charisma. So like again, role playing is role playing, and I mean, as a GM and a player, I like to do as much role playing before a die roll is needed. Listen, like if I can lie to you in character and make it believable, and sure, maybe there's a check that should be involved, but like if I charm you with just my role playing, well, maybe I don't need a persuasion because that guy's like, you know what, I do like that, whatever the case may be. But you might find that if your table relies on social checks a lot to get through those social mechanics, as a barbarian, you're not going to be on lead with that. And there's nothing saying that you can't have a good charisma as a barbarian. The barbarian ancestral guardian that I have a 14 charisma because that's part of my background. Um, but like, you know, that's certainly the exception and not the rule.
Yeah. But I mean, and there are some paths that help augment your skill choices and also utilities. So there are ways to shore up that weakness, but that means that you are dedicating yourself to one type of
Yep.
um. So yeah, to kind of move on, Rennie said it before. Flying sucks, dude. Enemies with high mobility, it's hard to lock them down. So unless you got like some sort of sentinel feat to augment yourself, or ways to deal with special movements, it can be difficult when you have truly mobile dragons who can use legendaries to fly or vampires to run. You know, there are very it's hard for you to often keep up at that point. So, finding something that help you do that either through a path of the barbarian or a magical item to boost your ability. Like I know, like Rennie has a rope of climbing and boots of speed for his barbarian, which hyper help because ain't no one running away from you, and he
Nope.
can leap, and climb things easier. So it's like there are ways to do it in very simple items or simple ways. And now, being a barbarian, you probably have a high jump, so as long if they're low flying, no problem. But teleporting opponents, they're difficult for most people, but I think other people have better tools for. due to your, again, relying on melee.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, it is a real problem. Again, honestly, we kind of talked about this during our fighter episode, um, and it's even more true for barbarians is that you can be outshined at higher levels by spellcasters in the form of utility spells, AOE damage, and stuff like that. Now, the nice thing for Barbarian is that even at higher levels, you know, being that neat tank with way too many hit points and taking half damage from stuff, that still has high value. Um, but just again, you you everything's a nail. And there's some nails that are big and some nails that are small, but like you only have a hammer. Um and as long as you're comfortable with being this primal warrior and being this barbarian and sort of handling your problems in this way, you're going to do fine. But you're when you get to those 10th beyond 10th level, you might find people start having a lot of tools in their toolbox, and you still have the one or maybe two if you have the right set of things. Gene, you want to talk about maintaining your rage directions?
yeah, your rage directions is definitely the main thing. So yeah, so maintaining
Rage? No.
maintaining rage is not difficult, but in certain situations is, and especially at lower levels. Part of being in rage is you either need to attack or take damage by the, I think, start of your turn, your next turn. I don't know, but
I
it's
want to
either.
say it's start.
And so if you didn't do that, you lose your rage, and a lot of your abilities are proccing off your rage. Now, at higher level, when you have persistent rage, that's not so hard to do. Things can't drop you out of rage, but it is, I think, much harder at lower level when you might have other actions that could be really useful in that time. So if you're not surrounded, not taking damage, your rage is a bit hard to maintain. It is nice that you start out with two and it only increases in number. So just consider that is a trade off, is that you must maintain this hype battle form, or else. And so like certain paths are much easier to do this with, like Path of the Storm or the Wild Magic, where you can kind of unleash these extra attacks. Oh, thank you, players and creators, for rating us.
Oh, hi guys. How do?
um, yeah, and so yeah, since your whole focus is rage, maintaining it is pretty important for you to really get the most bang for your buck out of what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. And again, to that end, like maintaining isn't the hardest thing because listen, you're gonna be in a dungeon. You might fight a dragon, Dungeons and Dragons. Uh, but it just is something to keep in mind that you always need to be striving to be like, make sure you're in danger. Whether you are the danger or you are in danger, you gotta keep that danger momentum. Um, so one of their last weaknesses before we move into the room of reflection, um, is sometimes right being this tank, right? You want to pull aggro off of your ally, and you want to kind of force enemies to fight you, or you want to entice enemies to fight you. Sometimes that can be difficult, you know each table is going to be a little different with how your GM runs your monsters. Um, but if I've seen it plenty of times, and I'm sure Gene can attest to this, where your GM is like, "Oh, I've attacked you for 2 rounds, and I hit you 4 times. It did like a total of like 14 damage." They're going to be like, "Well, fuck you. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go because." Like I don't care if you're gonna try to attack me. Just like I want to feel like I did something today, and again, it's going to be case to case basis, but sometimes forcing enemies to keep that aggro on you can be difficult without certain class features. Again, the Ancestral Guardian doesn't have as much problem with this because you make it if your enemies don't fight you, they really suffer for it. Um, and you can take certain feats to kind of make people stay where you want them, but without depending on the path you take, you might find that you need a few extra feats, abilities, something to kind of keep enemies in that danger zone to keep your momentum
Danger zone.
going. um, Thank you, Gene. Any other weaknesses we want to talk about? Anything that you can think of?
I mean, I think we covered their real weaknesses. But again, it's D&D. You guys, you'll probably have fun. Like, you're gonna do good. You're gonna hit things. You'll have fun, and every class has a weakness. There is no class that is
Oh yeah,
unfuckable.
yeah. Any class that we cover, by the way, we're going to talk about their weaknesses. But the nice thing is, it's a team game. So where your barbarian might not know how to deal with that spellcaster, your sorcerer buddy has spells for that, or whatever the case may be.
All right, I guess we're heading into our last room.
Room of reflection, reflection, reflection.
We are also into our last initiative roll for the night.
Oh, it's been pretty even, right? I mean, or you've
Yes,
won.
I've won two. You've won two.
Yeah, we're pretty even. So this is the tiebreaker.
All right.
Tiebreaker.
I gotta get my cat. So I guess you roll first because I accessed my cat.
Oh,
Ooh, down the middle.
Yee. Yee.
I mean, last fucking one, you won all of them, literally every single roll. All right, with that nat 20, I critted that shit
I
for
mean,
the room of reflection. All right, so let's start this off strong. Honestly, it's a great fucking multi-class. 3 levels of barbarian, you become the toughest person in existence. And as long as you're not a primary caster who focuses on concentration, it's almost not a wrong answer to multi-class into barbarian. Rogue might have some issues due to their requirements for sneak attack, but paladin, ranger, fighter, heck, even monk if you're a strength monk, like, yes, it's good. And honestly, it just gives you an extra survivability uh in uh in that class. Like, honestly, I love doing a little bit. While paladin is one of the greatest classes in the game, uh
correct.
correct, just the best. A dip into barbarian for reckless just to get those smite jams, and then you can be a raging paladin who just drops smites when you destroy people. Real nice. But then
It's messed up.
you just
It's,
can't
it's messed up.
you just can't concentrate on a lot, and that's the downside. But it's just good. Like, honestly, fighter augment, uh
Oh yeah, it's a
good.
match made in heaven with fighters.
I will say my favorite multi-class is actually a primary caster barbarian, which is the Circle of the Moon Druid with Barbarian Totem, because giving yourself damage reduction and essentially infinite hit points because you can wild shape. You only need 3 levels of Barbarian. You don't need anything else. Well, 5 maybe if you want to really get out multi attack, because not all animals have multi attack. But if you go higher enough level Druid, you don't really have to worry about that. So there's the give and the take. But just a few levels of Barbarian makes you able to, like, your AC sucks as animals anyway. So getting
Yep.
getting an unarmored defense and reckless, you're probably gonna get hit because you have an AC of 12 to 14. So who the fuck cares? You can really make your wild shapes be fucking just berserk tanks, especially with their self heals because they don't count as spells. There's a lot of jams and jankiness you can get out with that specific. Would be the worst multi class from DJ Poser.
I mean, wizard. Any sorcerer, wizard,
Yeah.
anything like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. So pretty much things that rely on concentration.
I mean, yeah, full casters, especially. Like, I think sorcerer may be it because like take spells away from a sorcerer or a wizard, and like you're just a guy in a skirt or a gal in a dress. Like that's it.
Yeah.
And rage ain't gonna fix it.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, clerics would suffer, but they do have a lot of abilities that they don't always like.
Clerics have some martial aptitude, so
Yeah,
like again, you'd be cutting out 70% of your class, but you could still hold your own, I
yeah. I
guess.
guess my worst would be probably rogue barbarian, unless you could somehow sneak attack with strength, which I don't think you can. But you might be able to sneak attack with strength if it's a finesse weapon.
Right, because it's about
So,
the weapon, it's not about the stat you
oh
use to hit
yeah.
someone with
So then
it.
I guess if you're using finesse weapons and you can figure out how to use your strength with that, then maybe rogue's good. But yeah, I don't know. The hardest classes, like Rennie said, let's be real: wizard, sorcerer, uh, warlock, mostly things that require stats that you're not going to use. I don't know. Rennie hates warlocks also. So
Just
Rennie,
barbarian warlock. I
the
can't.
next character you have to play is a battle rager warlock.
Oh my god. Why? What have I done to deserve this?
I just want you to play your fucking least favorite things together.
That sounds like you. All right, we're gonna move on. Um, yeah, barbarian's great multi-class. There's a lot of good choices there, as well as some really nice feat choices. Um, again, what I like to look at with barbarian, there's some obvious like power choices of just like great weapon master. Do you like hit hard? You can hit really hard. Like it's very obvious. Um, but there are some good feats out there to help shore up some of those barbarian weaknesses, like shield master. If you gotta go single weapon and shield, having shield master can help give you some crowd control. You shove people around,
don't
help save your butt
don't
in
have to
in
use
on deck
reckless as
saves.
much.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, and so there's stuff like that, and again, if you're lacking skills or tools that you really want to be represented because of your background or because of the story you're trying to make, taking those skilled or whatever. So there's a lot of the common like polar master, great weapon master. You're never gonna have a bad time if you want to get huge weapons and hit real hard. Mobility, honestly, amazingly useful for barbarians. You already get increased movement speed and getting an even greater movement speed, and then being able to leave enemies after you attack them. That may not always be what you want, but having the option to do it is not a bad thing. Um, there's a ton of options, and now we have weapon options with like slasher, piercer, crusher. Um, and again, as a barbarian, you're probably going to find a weapon or a pair of weapons that's like, this is the thing I kill with. I kill good with this, and maybe taking one of those weapon feats that match the weapon you use, you can find some real success in adding status effects or conditions to when you hit people. Because as a barbarian, you're gonna hit people a lot. So you're never going to have a bad time with anything that is hit people plus an addition. Um, yeah. So there are some really good feat support for barbarian, and I'll say this: I think there's even an argument to be made for some magic initiate stuff. Again, you can't cast while you rage, but giving yourself a familiar, uh, giving yourself some out of combat utility, you're not going to have a bad time if you have some minor magical capabilities that coincide with whatever story you're telling. Like, listen, if you want to play a wild surge barbarian with magic initiate, wizard, or sorcerer, I could see that totally working. Um, so yeah, either strengthening the things you do well as a barbarian or shoring up weaknesses you have as a barbarian using feats. I think that there's some really good options there, depending on your build and your stats and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I think I think I
Um,
think you could make a really nice grappling
oh yeah,
barbarian with like grappler and tavern brawler, and even if you can nab the unarmed fighting style, you could just headlock people to death or crush them with
right.
your thighs. Thighs are also
Yep, yep. Um, yeah, and I mean, I've talked about this ancestral guardian barbarian that I have a fair bit. Again, I also have, in the fighter episode, I talked about my fighter barbarian that I like a whole lot, and I got that character to 20th, which was awesome. So I will say I definitely enjoy that sort of you know Hercules holding up a column while there's the sun behind you casting this silhouette of a massively muscular person carrying something way too big to be carried by them. Like, I enjoy that kind of imagery and that iconography very much. um so I mean, I've talked a fair bit about my kind of barbarians. Gene, I don't know, do you want to share anything that you've played
oh
around with?
yeah. I once played a halfling barbarian known as the Incredible Hank, and he was a barbarian totem barbarian who drew the power from every man, woman, and child who bear the name Hank, and his totem was the Hank
A
Force.
surprising amount of people did.
Yeah, and also because he was because he was an a totem barbarian, and could speak with animals and beast bond. What was a little known fact was that all animals actually bear the name Hank, and so any rascal, varmint, or critter who bore the name Hank, he could speak to, and that's how I used my communing with creatures. And I was like a 3-foot-8 halfling who was just muscle bound, and I drew like a really shitty picture. It was really bad,
It was
but
hilarious.
it was ludicrous, and that was probably my favorite fucking barbarian I've ever played in my life.
Well, it was also fun because Gene, this was a character we would bring to other tables because it was like a organized play, and so whenever Gene would rage,
Oh
how
well,
does he rage, Gene?
Hank! You have to call the Hank Force to really
Right.
encourage that power.
And let me tell you, hearing Gene bellow Hank from across the room is a spiritual experience, to say the least.
Yeah, that was
Um,
a fun character.
yeah. I'm going to share a quick one before we move on. So this ancestral guardian barbarian. So the way that I kind of flavor the way he summons his ancestors is, so he kind of has this Maori inspiration. He's got these body tattoos that go from like forehead to ankle, but he only has half of them on his body because when he finished, or when he would have finished his trial to become an adult and a recognized member of the community, he sort of gets the other half to show that he has gone on this journey. Now, in his background, in a shared background, he never got the chance to get the other half of his tattoos because his family and village was murdered and razed. Yes, very original. I know the screenplay is coming to Netflix soon. But the when I rage, the way that I describe it is that the other half of my body it becomes sort of, I complete the pattern of the tattoos with this spectral energy, as like the rage and my ancestors have given me the guidance and the knowledge and the acceptance to say that, no, you are a complete being. So that's just how I decided to flavor ancestral guardians. And then when I use spirit shield to protect my allies, it's like, spectral earth ganasis like getting in the way and bringing up their shields only to be dispersed into spectral energy.
And like in our Curse of Strahd game run by Julia, our Gremlin Mardukov is a beast barbarian, and he's a shifter. So it just means that like he has a stronger bloodline or connection to this
Right.
lycanthropic nature.
Yeah, he really leaned in.
Definitely not a vampire. Definitely a were creature. But yeah, I mean, so we apparently answered most of these audience questions, as no one has asked us any, or I've answered them as we've gone. So if
Fantastic.
yeah, if unless anyone comes in real quick, think we're about ready to close out.
Sure.
So
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I thought we were gonna get much angrier during this episode, Gene. I feel like something would have been broken.
yeah, I mean, I drank a whole bottle, the quarter bottle of wine, but I'm not gonna smash it on my concrete floor.
I was say now you smash it, right? You can pull the Thor. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us for episode 3 of Dungeon Delvers. Man, gee, we're already at 3 episodes. That's cool.
Oh boy.
That's a whole thing. Um, and yeah, thanks for sticking with us and hearing us jaw on about the angriest boys and girls in D&D. Um, and we want to give a thank you, shout out to players and creators. Thanks for the raid. Gene, any other shout outs you want to throw?
I mean, again, thank you, Julia, for participating and moderating. Thank you, GJ Poser, for hanging out and asking questions and mentioning the forbidden Barbarian, which no one should.
Yeah, thank you, 86 Me Daddy, for interacting with the chat and keeping us on our toes. Um, and I think that's gonna do it, guys.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you guys, and we'll figure out a schedule at one point.
Yeah, we're really playing off Curse of Strahd right now. We're doing our best to figure out a more permanent schedule for that and a permanent schedule for this. And I assure you, there will be a day, a time, a place, a spot that both of these shows will happen in a
Yeah.
week. That day is not today, but it's coming.
But it is coming. All right. Well, thank you. And
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. We will see you next time.